Okay, welcome to the Bellevue School District regular board meeting for April 20th, 2021. We'll start with roll call. I'm Francine Wiest.
Carolyn Watson.
Christine Chu.
Erica Malif.
Seema Sarafan.
Ivan Duran.
All right, and now we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to ask John Harrison to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh. And could you lead us in the land acknowledgement as well?
We acknowledge, honor, and respect that our broad community of Bellevue School District students, families, educators, and staff live and learn on the traditional indigenous lands of the Coast Salish peoples. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to do so since time immemorial. And I just want to thank Dr. Wiest for giving me the opportunity to lead the pledge as a new American citizen. That's a first for me, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you. All right, so that brings us to our acknowledgements, and we're putting them up on the screen. We did talk about them in depth at the last meeting, but it continues to be April, and these acknowledgements continue to hold. And then usually we have a student update, but that is on hold for this month, but we look forward to having the student updates in the future. And then also, Dr. Duran, there has been interest from the board to be able to hear from perhaps all of the student advisory council, perhaps having some of us attend one of their meetings or getting a fuller update now that they've been in session for several months.
Yes, we can have the conversation, consider it. Right now they are planning for a student town hall focused on creating a culture of belonging and dignity. So I have a meeting with them this week so I can talk to them about setting up a time for that conversation.
Great, thank you. All right, so that brings us to approval of the agenda. So I motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second, Dr. Chu?
No, I don't have a second. I was actually going to ask for a change.
I as well.
Why don't we second and then we can move.
Okay, I'll wait
to change it. So
Oh.
do you have a second?
Sure, I second so that we can get it into discussion.
Yes.
So the thing I wanted to raise is just a tiny thing, and it's sort of related to something you just mentioned. We need to make sure that we have at least 5 minutes for the SIFE committee to give an update on the forums that we're holding with different community groups. We have an update and information, and we also have an ask that we want to just get some information from board directors. So we need at least 5 minutes, and I think we only have 5 minutes total scheduled for that section.
Board business. Okay, so yeah, so far we have no board director updates were submitted for this meeting. So right now we do have time under item 7, but we could extend that as well. Director Sarafan, what was your proposal?
I'd like to ask that we switch the order of 6 and 5. I understand why the Goal 2 report would be relevant, but I believe most families and parents are most interested in knowing the back to school piece, and should anything get shorted, I would like, for me, it's more relevant to start with that. So that's my request.
Okay, are there any other suggestions for the agenda? All right, so I'm going to take Director Chu's as part of item 7, so we can just add that specifically for under 7.1. Well, we can add a different point. So we can make 7.3 would be SIFE or committee reports. And then
it might be worth leading with the SIFE thing.
Okay, so we can make that 7.1. Ms. Casper, should we make that 7.1 and then we move everything else down to 7.2, 7.3, and then we can add 5 minutes of the time to that section, which will right now come out of our break, which is the break as we go into executive session. So there's time there. And then, so I'll take that unless there are any objections. And then the second one from Director Sarafan, I'll put to a vote. Is there a second for Director Sarafan's motion? Dr. Chu?
Yeah, I would second that. I think that it's appropriate to look at the logistics of that because that's where a lot of families and so forth are at. I think it's also important to discuss the content of that report because that's about how our kids are actually doing in this year and how well we're serving them. So I think both are important, but I do think that it makes some sense to kind of lead with the questions that are top of many people's minds and then go into the and where are our kids at exactly right now.
Is there any other discussion regarding that? All right, so I'll indicate that there is information in that report that then lends itself to the discussion, and that's why the order is that way. I'm also concerned about changing it at this time in case people are tuning in to listen specifically for the COVID updates, and then they'll miss them because they're expecting them at a certain time. So with that, all those in favor of Director Seraphin's motion to change the order, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so we have 3 in favor. So Ms. Gasparich, if you can just adjust the times, we'll swap numbers 5 and 6. All right, with that, all those in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the agenda as amended has passed. That now moves us to the consent agenda. Motion that we approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, is there any discussion, or sorry, was there anybody who wanted to extract anything from the consent agenda? I did have one question, Dr. Duran, regarding the consent agenda and the surplus items. The district has spent considerable effort to ensure that we have, up-to-date safety protocols and devices throughout the district, and I noticed that a number of AEDs are being surplused. There was an accompanying memo, but it did not indicate if we're getting new ones, kind of what the nature behind that is. That this has been a subject of discussion previously, and if there wasn't any reasoning behind there. Could you clarify?
Thank you. Go ahead, Melissa.
We had a program over the last couple of years to replace all of them and get them all the same brand and the same model number. And now that we have done that, plus we put them in, we had somebody come in and do a review of our facilities so that they are in the appropriate locations and appropriately spaced. So there is an issue, you can get to one within a timely manner. And so these are the old ones that were in our buildings that came down when we went through and replaced everything. So every building has brand new ones. They're all the same model. They're the same type that are used by emergency responders here. And so we're much better aligned to our community.
Excellent, thank you. So it would be helpful in the memos in the future to have that information. That was what I gathered was the case, but I think it would be useful to have that in the future.
Great, thank you.
Just so you're aware, that was reported multiple times last year in the budget reports for safety and security. So
I understand that. I think it's just at the time of the surplus that we should have it documented together at the same time.
So I did actually wonder also about that item, and I guess what you're implying is that they're not of any use to have extra ones so people don't have to go as far to get them, or they don't work or something?
well, you have to maintain them. And so if you're maintaining, it's kind of like all of our buses have the same engines because we don't want to have to keep parts for 3 different types of engines. So same thing with AEDs, you have to have all the parts, you have to maintain them, you have to replace batteries, you replace pads. And so having them all be the same model and same brand is super helpful for us in terms of moving forward. Some of them were out of certification, some of them were very old. We've never had a program to maintain them all until now.
And I think, again, the important point in that is that it aligns with what the city of Bellevue has also from their emergency responders so that there's consistency with the equipment when they come into our buildings if necessary.
All right, anything else from the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the consent agenda passes. That brings us to item 3. Dr. Duran, superintendent update.
Yep, but first just like to start acknowledging the George Floyd trial and the results from that. So today, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was found guilty of second-degree unintended murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter in the May 2020 death of George Floyd. As this trial has ended, we acknowledge this is a painful and re-traumatizing time. The recent deaths of Dante Wright and Adam Toledo, which have not been prosecuted, on top of this trial, are taking really big toll on our school community. I am mindful of our students and our families, and they may be affected from these series of events, and know that as educators, we must continue to provide the academic, emotional, and social support toward positive impact in their lives so they are ensured that they are supported by our BSD community. What is happening in our nation is impacting all of us in different ways based on our own lived experiences, and BSD remains committed to the goal to affirm and inspire and thrive for each and every student. And although today may be considered a victory, I think victory would really be George Floyd being alive. And this is a victory for one case, but we know there's many other cases that have not been prosecuted, have not been brought to justice. And so it's a good piece for us to think about and reflect on as a society. The second thing I'd like to address is SRO work, and our advisory group continues to move forward and work. We have another meeting coming up, and very recently we had some really deep discussions around really starting to think about what could this program look like if we continue to have it in our district. One of the things that's very important is that as our students start to return to more in-person services, we are ensuring, have worked with our safety and security departments, worked with each and every school at secondary level to ensure that we have safety plans in place. The SROs were just one part of that plan, and we really want to ensure that we are, following the really strong safety pieces. By law now, we have to have a new MOU signed with the city of Bellevue. We do not have that done yet. We're waiting for the advisory group work to do that. So the SROs will not be in our buildings during this time. And again, we're pointing back to our safety measures that we have placed in all of our schools. We're in close contact with the city of Bellevue. We know the response time is very quick, and we will continue to monitor this, but it's important work to still moving forward and really look forward to what the advisory group is going to be recommending to us. Another piece is our communications, as we continue to expand and think about our communications and hiring of officer for communication and engagement. We have a list of finalists from the applicant pool, and we are starting to review those files now. So we will keep you informed of the process and also the process that we will use to not only screen, but then to interview the candidates. And then finally, our plan through OSPI has been approved. We expect our letter to be in our hands on April 26th. They asked to wait to send that letter into then because that's when they saw that we were actually having more of our students back on a regular basis. And at that time, we can start to draw down some of our ESSER funds. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Sorry, I have one question, if I could, just based on your update. So Dr. Wren, thank you for the update. I'm just unclear on one piece. So on the SROs, you mentioned that you need an MOU. But what I didn't understand is it sounds like you're saying that you're waiting for the advisory report.
The advisory committee is working through that process right now because one of the things that we asked them to do was to start to really build and think about what would we want the SRO program to look like. And as they build on that and come up with recommendations, we will take that and craft that into an MOU with the city of Bellevue.
I guess I understand. I think the piece I don't understand is just the timing. Like why, knowing that we were going to have students back, why would we not already have had that report? Because I thought that the plans were started on this review back in, as I recall, last summer and then September. So why not yet? I guess is my question.
Well, I would say that the advisory committee has really been spending a lot of time, understanding the data that we really struggled to get in the beginning, and we were able to access quite a lot of it. And so there literally was 2 sessions that were spent just on that very conversation around what the data was and really understanding. We also took more time to gather more stakeholder feedback on that. So the process was delayed a bit in terms of the timing of what we were trying to accomplish, but I feel that both of those pieces were critical because we have never looked at the data to the degree that we did with the advisory group. And as the group continues to move forward, I would say that they really are struggling with the recommendation and what they want to see in the SRO program. There's still, some divide within the group. And so we're working with them, with our equity specialists, talking about equity and what this looks like and ensure that we're bringing in those experiences. So it has just been a slower process for us.
Okay, could I just ask one final thing? What was the original date? Like, was there an original expectation and then it got pushed out?
No, we didn't have an original date. We had dates on the calendar for the SRO meetings that we were hoping, well, I should say we were hoping to finish it up by, the March timeframe, but with the 2 meetings that we pushed out, we added more meetings to it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Director Chu.
Yeah, on the SRO, I do have a question. It sounds like the way that you're talking about it, it sounds like there's a presumptive that there will be an MOU. It's just what will the MOU look like? Is that something that the committee came to the conclusion and recommended, that there should be a program of this nature? Or was there an option that was also considered to redesign the services and identify the needs and change how we were taking care of all the needs that it was trying to fill?
So we have to have a signed MOU if we continue to have the SRO program, but this is something that the committee is still wrestling with. So they have not come out with a recommendation yet. And so, the question was, the timing of the SRO advisory group and, having officers here knowing that we were going to be starting school and the timing of that piece. So they have not come out with a clear recommendation yet in this area.
So to clarify, there's no presumption there. We're waiting to get that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of the things that, as we've been having conversations with them, the group has really wrestled with, are they going to be able to come to consensus around this or not? And that's some of the deeper conversations that we've had. So as I said, this has really taken a lot more time because we're spending the time for people to have these really challenging and difficult conversations around the program as a overall.
So what, just to follow up and clarify, so then what has the district done so that there is this time period during which it's still being sorted out, but the program presumably was designed to take care of some needs? Do we have an alternate plan in place from now until that plan is sorted out to meet those needs that are supposed to be served?
Yes, as I mentioned, the first part of the report, that every school has a safety plan that they re-looked at in consideration of school students returning and knowing that there was going to be different, things that we had to take in place. So our safety and security office has worked with every one of our schools to update their safety plans and ensure that they have really strong plans in place in case there is something that does happen with one of our schools. We also have been in contact with the city of Bellevue so they understand the situation. And, as been talking with Chief Milet previously, the Bellevue Police has a 2-minute response time in parts of our city, any part of our city. And so we know that, they're aware of this and they will be, supporting us as best as possible. But every school has gone through a process to think about what safety is going to look like.
Okay. Any further questions for the superintendent? All right, I have one, and it relates to as we transition to the next item on the agenda. So we received, as a board, a series of anonymous educator comments, and I was wondering if that was at all coordinated by the district. It's unclear whether these were selected comments or whether they're broadly represented through a survey that was done.
Can you clarify for me, Dr. Wiest? We've received board comments that have been coming in both yesterday and today, but yes. No, they are not coordinated by the district.
So has the district done a survey to collect teacher responses? We did a survey
right before spring break to determine how many educators were interested in offering in-person services for the week of April 19th.
And did that include comments, or has there been a collection of comments to reach out to our educators in a systematic way?
No, there has not. And
okay.
Can you please clarify what you're trying to pursue in your question?
I'm just clarifying what aspects, if any, the district has done since we've been receiving this, and so we're trying to determine this kind of the nature and source of the comments.
You mean from the responses that we've received it to this point?
They're coming into
we've just been reading them. That's the one thing that we always do is read all the comments come into the board's box and the superintendent's box. So we have been reading them. I can't speak on behalf of the emails that were sent in.
Right, but just clarifying what the source was and whether the district was coordinating any efforts to survey educators. All right, so with that, we'll move on to public comments. The public comment guidelines are posted here. I'll note that the board has accepted public comments for this meeting via online written submissions and also recognizes that there are in-person participants who would like to share. So portions of policy 1400 were suspended to allow for additional time to accommodate these dual pathways. As previously by policy 1400, the board can only allocate a maximum of 10 minutes for public comment in a single meeting. Further, there were time constraints on the location of comments within the agenda, and although the Open Public Meetings Act, under which this board must operate, does not call for public comment, historically, the Bellevue School Board, as codified in policy 1400, recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in its meetings. So with that, we have allocated 2 minutes. I think what was flashed on the screen there was the old things. What I just read was the current, and we will be doing 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes, and the order is on the screen there. So in person, I'm sorry, I thought the full names were going to be posted, but anyway, the first person should come up to the screen. So that's, I think Michelle Jewell. Yeah, if you come up there and you'll have up to 2 minutes, and then as you're going back to your seat, we'll have the first remote comment being read, and then the next person, so that would be Allison Snow, can start coming up to the podium while the remote one is being read. Is that clear? So we'll just swap back and forth in the interest of time, but to also allow for distancing. And I will give you a 10-second warning with a tap there to let you know you have 10 seconds to wrap up, and we're you just kind of wrap up, and then we're all good. We look forward to hearing what everyone has to say.
Thank you, ladies, for allowing me to come here and speak. I kind of wish it could be private because it's personal information, but you need to be aware of it. My youngest son is suffering in the most serious way from isolation. He is so lonely that he's becoming unmotivated, confrontational, and has moved on to anger. He cuts himself. My son cuts himself to escape the pain of loneliness. My husband and I have to insist that he keep his door open at all times so that we can watch him. I don't sleep until I know he's asleep. We've spent immeasurable amounts of time with him and visited regularly with psychiatrists and psychologists to help protect him from hurting himself. He is in desperate need for interaction with kids his age. And I do not mean interaction online. It's not the same. On Friday, his first day on campus, thank the Lord, with other kids at Bellevue High School, he experienced that interpersonal joy for the first time in a year. I think I made a friend, Mom. That's the first thing out of his mouth when he hopped in my car. No medicine, no parent, no counseling session or game could have given him that interpersonal connection with a peer that he needed so deeply. These kids need each other, and I know that you know that. They need each other. It's not rocket science. We're guardians of these children and their emotional well-being as well as their academic success. We're hurting them by keeping them away from each other. You must get more creative on how to get Bellevue's children back to school full time. And if you're not up for the job on figuring that out, then I respectfully request you step aside and let someone else in to do that. Many other school districts and private schools in our immediate area are successfully getting their kids back to school for long, full days. Why is Bellevue not there yet? Please fight for full-time, in-person schooling before my son cuts himself too deep.
Okay, this one's from Rachel. It says, "Dear board members, in the hybrid secondary schedules video shared by the district, I noticed that the asynchronous learning is no longer mentioned for those afternoon sessions. Instead, it's called virtual learning opportunities. Emphasize intervention of students at risk of failing their courses, as well as enrichment opportunities. It seemed students not at risk of failing their courses still do not get much interaction with their teachers. Just like the old asynchronous days, can you please ask the school district to provide more guidance to teachers of how to improve the utilization of afternoon school hours? Can you please ask the school district to provide clarification to parents and students of what to expect in the afternoons? We hope that more quality instruction can be given during the afternoon hours. Sincerely, Rachel.
Go ahead.
My name is Allison Snow, and for most of my 14 years with the Bellevue School District, I've been a 5th grade science teacher. And if you visited my classroom on any given day, as several of you have, it may have looked to you like kids were just playing with scientific instruments, and it was intentionally so. Because as an educator, I understand the most important learning occurs when students experience an environment that inspires and enables them to discover knowledge for themselves. I carry this understanding with me now in my role as president of the Bellevue Education Association. Just as I did as a teacher, I have much learning to do in this role. And just like in our classrooms, opportunity for learning and growth in our district will best flourish where it is given the space to do so. The work our educators and administrators have done to navigate the COVID pandemic may not look the way you expect it should, and I understand the instinctive desire to step in and try to control it for the good of our students. But I assure you that protecting and nurturing our students is at the heart of all we do. The challenging times we are living through have strained our ability to trust one another in that shared purpose, but we have before us an opportunity. I'm here tonight to publicly invite you to lean into that opportunity, seek to understand, meet with the educators who are doing extraordinary work in unprecedented times, learn about the interest-based process we use to weigh competing demands and negotiate a path forward, and build the relationships that will allow us to trust one another in this work. Let us come together to understand where there are gaps between our intent and their impacts, and create the environment that will inspire all in our district to thrive.
This email is from Sean Hyatt, and the subject line is Bellevue's inadequate reopening plan. The recent MOU and back to school plan does not go nearly far enough in providing our kids the right to real education. You are running out of opportunities to have a positive effect on a generation of Bellevue students. Hold Superintendent Duran and the rest of your administration accountable to adopt real science. Carolyn, even Gupta has tempered his dogmatism in recent statements forecasting normalcy by July. The state mandates as tepid as they are, and the needs of your own true constituents, Bellevue kids and their families, stand up to BEA. Announce 100% full-time instruction in the fall immediately, so families can make plans to leave the BSD if you won't. Make a statement for kids and education over union interests and politics. Renew your commitment to our kids and hold people accountable. The transparent equivocation manifested in a 2.5 partial day per week of diluted in-person instruction while maintaining debunked, discredited, and dated safety protocol is an embarrassment, not a testament to leadership. Look around, BSD is being lapped by competitors, failing compared to a new fleet and nimble Lake Washington, and now even Issaquah, and truly competing for a Nobel Prize with nationally underperforming Seattle. And if you don't understand or try to deny that comparison, please step aside. Reopen schools, Sean G. Hyatt.
All right, so is Ms. Gilbert here? No? All right, so then we'll move on to the next comment.
Sorry, these are all different orders. Okay, this one is on behalf of Rachel Taniki, and the comment or the subject line is don't give Boost the boost. And it says, Dear Bellevue School Board, I'm writing to you to share my concerns about the district's intent to contract out Bellevue out of school time, Boost childcare. As a member of the Bellevue community, I believe it is crucial that the district provide a high-quality union program like Boost. Consistency is critical for our students right now, and taking away their Boost teachers will only hurt our transition efforts. I ask you to pledge support of our district-run programs and not contract out to the Bellevue School District employees, including Boost. Sincerely, Rachel Takichi.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Tockley. I work at the ESC as the high school math curriculum developer. I also serve on the executive board for BEA. In a year like no other, we've navigated numerous storms and faced many challenges. It's easy to focus on what ifs, if onlys, or even the negative things that have happened. However, there have been a lot of positive things as well. We recently surveyed all of our BEA members and asked them to respond to this prompt. A positive story I would like to share with the school board is, I have several of these responses to share with you tonight. One of the educators said, every student passed my high school math courses first semester. The time after lunch allowed me to meet one-on-one and in small groups with students who needed extra support. Other students used the time like normal tutorial, messaging me to call them on Teams or answer questions. I've been able to differentiate my instruction more than I can with in-person instruction. Another educator wrote, a 7th grade student mentioned that she felt, quote, caught in the middle, returning to in-person classes. When I asked her if she could explain what she meant, she said her parent was mad at Bellevue teachers, but she liked her teachers and their classes. That means even if I don't feel supported by my school district, school board, or building administration, I still have the support of a bright, kind, and ambitious student. Her opinion matters most, but it would feel nice to feel even a glimmer of that respect from others in the community. Another person wrote, my students love being back in school, but one of their favorite things they've told me is how much we get done and how much more supported they feel because the class size is smaller than 25 to 32 kids. I've already seen huge gains, especially with my students who are struggling with online learning. Another wrote, students who never talk in physical classrooms have blossomed online this year. I have gotten to know some really fantastic human beings who might have otherwise slipped through the cracks because they struggle to socialize in person. Yet online, these students love to share and have made incredible growth because they are able to participate in a platform where they feel comfortable. And the last educator I have here is, I've been teaching virtually and in-person hybrid at the same time. Because of my union and district's focus on SEL, I know my students better and I'm more in tune to their specific needs. The trust I've been able to build with families has led to a shift in my 2 classes from 9 hybrid and 14 virtual to 8 virtual and 15 hybrid as of last week, with 2 more coming in the next couple of weeks. This would not be possible without my district and union's emphasis on SEL. And finally, I would just like to add my own comment to this. I've seen my colleagues work tirelessly to meet ever increasing and changing demands expected of them. They've been knocked down, beat up, and left bruised. As professionals, they have tried out the new technology and ways of teaching, reflected on what works and what needs to change, and adjusted based on that reflection. It's not been easy, but they have endured and persevered. The educators and BSDs are professionals who care deeply about their students and want to serve their families well. I work with amazing colleagues, and I want the school board to know that. Each of these people, these colleagues, are valuable and deserving of your support and respect. Thank you.
This email is from Wuhai Yan, and the subject line is no update on motion to extend in-person learning. 2.5 days a week for returning to school is not enough for students. All of our neighbor school districts are offering 2 full days or even 4 full days. Why not BSD? What exactly is preventing BSD from opening schools for full days? Can the district be transparent, not just announce the results and ask all parents and students to accept whatever is offered when the negotiation is done? We always hear the saying that the MOU is signed and it's too late to change it, but what have you done when it's not too late? BSD is significantly deficient on instructional time and far behind from completing the educational goals for students. Who is responsible for the consequences of these failing MOUs? Who is responsible for the failure to deliver quality education to our BSD students? We need to go back to full day real learning like other school districts. This is the strongest demand from parents who choose either hybrid or virtual learning. The half-day back-to-school schedule also exasperates inequality as working parents like me who cannot pick up our children from multiple schools in the middle of the day and have to choose virtual learning. We haven't heard any update on the motion to extend in-person learning time. Every day counts and every delay is not acceptable. We are really disappointed at the bureaucracy and incompetence of the BSD. BSD parent who won't.
My name is actually Van Buskirk, but it's not the first time it's been misspelled. I'm going to go off the script that I wrote because I'm hearing these wonderful teachers talking about how hard it's been for them. It's also been hard for us. I'm a teacher. I'm a private school teacher. I've been teaching this entire time. With mask, without mask, whatever the rules were, we did it. I taught online to kindergartners. 1,400 kids, that's how many you think are leaving? We have all your kindergartners. They are coming to our school and paying through the teeth to bring their kids to our school. That's where they're going. I'm sorry you've had a hard year. We've all had a hard year. We've all had to adjust. And a little girl telling you how great you are, I'm glad for you. Kids are great. They love you. They love you. The little ones do. I have a junior. He sits in his room half a day, every day of the week. We don't have a big enough house for an office. He was holding on through the football season that was cut short. It was whatever. Now he has no hope. These kids are doing drugs. They're in rehab. The hospitals are overflowing with suicide attempts, with kids who have committed suicide at my son's school, 2 of them. My son is the most normalized, great kid, and he has lost all hope. And I'm gonna let you know, we let him have this year because we hoped that you guys would do well. I knew you wouldn't. I knew it wouldn't happen. I knew it wouldn't happen, and I warned him, but we hoped it would be better. We're taking him out. We will send him anywhere but here. And I've been here my entire life. I went to Eastgate Elementary School. I went to Ty Middle School, Newport High School, and my daughter didn't have a graduation, and now I'm gonna have a son that's not gonna have a graduation. And you all know it. You know it, all of you that are watching. The BEA sits and talks about how they talk to the teachers and we just all have these wonderful moments about what we've accomplished this year. Look at Larry Delaney's website. Look at that website and tell me that the teachers are here for our kids. Our kids don't trust you. Every one of my son's kids are suffering. This woman's son, she's telling you her son is cutting himself. You guys have got to represent us. You have got to fight this union or you will never have control for your children ever again. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. If I had small children, please take your children out of this school district.
This email is from Kyle Reimergarden. Hello, board members. We, BEA Executive Board, would like to share with you the following anonymous messages from BEA members. Our MOU supports students' mental health because it minimizes major change and it also leaves students time and space to learn at their own pace and take breaks. Students have the option to continue to be fully virtual or have in-person time as we focus on learning how to do in-person school in the time of COVID. What I appreciate about the latest MOU is it is taking into account the need for more equitable practices that are rooted in social justice and safety. I still have the opportunity to work with small groups and individual students after lunch. Remote learning has highlighted students that need individual time working with me to be successful. It tries to address all things in a way that is fair for all students, but is also fair for educators, many of whom have school-age children themselves. The district and teachers negotiating teams seem to have worked together in a much more productive manner than previous negotiations. I firmly believe that we need to be on the same page to serve our students and our families. It was developed by both educators in the district to give us the opportunity to finish the year with students at the center. It allows us to preserve families' choice to remain virtual and serve those children while expanding options for others who choose. Thank you for reading this and have a nice day. Kyle Reimergarden, Elementary Representative, BEA Executive Board.
All right, is our next speaker here? No? All right, we'll go to the next one.
This is from Regan Lorden. I would like to share with you the following anonymous messages from BEA members. Our MOU supports students' mental health because flexibility in curriculum and assessment is what's best for students. It prioritizes in-person time for those who really need it and allow for interactions for hybrid students. The agreement does not force families to make big changes or send their students in person if they choose virtual. Just putting kids who have been through a trauma in a building is not enough. Providing different options for all our learners and staff is crucial. Time is allotted during period 8 for social emotional learning. It supports SEL-focused teaching and provides access to learning without overwhelming. It has been designated time for community, who is much needed for new students. This is a hard time because so many students have been through times of duress this year, but adding on to these difficulties by risking students' lives or long-term health is a leap in the wrong direction. We must limit ourselves to hybrid or remote instruction this spring to prevent an even worse situation from developing.
Good afternoon. I'm a BSD parent. On March 15th, Governor Inslee mandated that all K-12 public schools are prohibited from providing remote education only and must offer students in-person learning no later than April 19th. Violators of this order may be subject to criminal penalties pursuant to the revised Code of Washington. Today is April 20th. BSD and the BEA intentionally and deliberately are ignoring the lawful order from Governor Inslee. Currently, Odell Middle School offers no in-person learning per Principal Miller's email to Odell families. BSD and BEA are failing in their duties and teaching our children it's okay to miss deadlines, ignore the governor, and commit crimes.
All right, that concludes our public comment session for today. I would like to note that all public comments submitted online and in compliance with stated requirements, whether or not they are read aloud during the meeting, will be included as part of the official record for the next regular board meeting following receipt of the comments. And as well, our volunteer board of directors very much appreciates the time and effort put into public comments and correspondence to us. For those who are not able to be heard in session today, submissions in writing are welcome. And that brings us now to our COVID updates. Dr. Duran, as I turn it over to you, I will note that it looks like the COVID update has been added there. I think it was added just very recently, so there may not have been time for in-depth review. And as well, I believe there are several items from last meeting that were brought up that will be covered today. And then pertinently, the board resolution that instructs the district to be in compliance with the governor's emergency proclamation, as well as all rules, regulations, and laws that we all as directors have taken an oath to uphold. So we would like an update on the district's compliance.
Okay, great. That's where we're going to start. And as you mentioned, we have a number of items that were brought up from the last board meeting, so we're planning on addressing them. So we have different members of our team that will be talking about them and the items that we're discussing. So one of the first things to start off with is that, as we updated the board last Friday, we did mention that first and foremost, the first item on the resolution was continue to work already began with Bellevue Education Association and other stakeholders to provide in-person instruction through implementation of the current March 26th MOU. So we have started that work to meet with the association. I had a one-on-one conversation with President Snow last week, or previously right before spring break. And then we had another conversation today with the BEA leadership talking about, what our partnership is right now, and then also leaning into what does it look like to maximize this current MOU. We have started already, we talked about, wanting to make sure that there was no plans, but that we actually had some work in process. So beginning April 26th, approximately 400 additional students will have the option to attend school in person for up to 5 days per week. These are students who were credit deficient or failing in grades. And so that's all the way from 6th grade through 12th grade. We met with our elementary and secondary leaders prior to spring break. We met with them again today to really talk about what does maximization of this MOU look like, what are ideas that they have, what are the things that they're doing. Our secondary school leaders are now really putting together very clearly phone calls to students. They have counselors on that so they can try to bring students back for the 26th. That's the first part of the resolution. As I mentioned, we had a meeting today, our normal meet and confer with BEA, and that's a regular meeting that we have on the books. We started some conversations around this first part of the resolution. We are continuing some of our conversations tomorrow as we have the discussion around what does it look like to maximize this current MOU. So that conversation is continuing because we didn't have time to reach any kind of agreement or conversation that really allowed us to share anything beyond that. The second one was enable in-person instructional opportunities the week of April 19th. So we did survey our educators before spring break to ask if anybody was interested in doing that and what that would look like. We needed to survey our educators at that time because we needed to ensure that we would be able to provide transportation and to meet their nutritional requirements that are so important. And so this week, we do have RISE offering in-person instruction. We have our CTE in-person instruction occurring. There were some issues with vaccine we wanted just to confirm, but we know that it's happening. Our CTE health science students are on site doing some of their internships right now. We had a dual language classroom at Stevenson, being in person, providing that, and then we had 5th grade band. So we didn't have a large number of educators that responded to the survey wanting to provide and offer additional in-person services this week. And then the third one is continue increasing towards maximum capacity and frequency of on-campus in-person instruction. So that is really addressing the governor's proclamation around maximizing time and space. And so as I mentioned, we started some of those conversations with VEA leadership, and we will continue those conversations tomorrow. So that's where we are with the resolution as of this time. Melissa, what would you add to that at this point?
I do have a question, and perhaps you can let me know who might be able to address it. So when we spoke recently, we asked you about, even if we assumed 6 feet apart, we should still be able to get to 2 full days and then a 3rd day. That would be a true model of hybrid. And as I recall, what you pointed out was a challenge was nutrition. And we asked why not be able to have box lunches and be outside? But let's prioritize that. So can you have someone speak to that?
Yes, I can. We have looked in that very closely, and as Melissa can add to that, because there are quite a few requirements that we would have to follow. And so go ahead, Melissa. Turn your mic on.
Sorry, I'm getting there. We basically have 2 options there. One option is to do a 7-period day with 3 lunch periods at all schools because we can't get kids through in 6-foot seating if we only do 2 lunch periods. Outdoor space that is covered and available. We could bring tents in, but then we'd have to put them on the fields and then we'd have to cancel the athletics, which again, I don't think is necessarily a good trade-off. So we looked at every single building and we looked at what outdoor seating is available that is covered because our weather is not going to stay as beautiful as it is right now between now and the end of the school year. So we can either do 3 lunch periods per day, which we have a schedule that would support that, or we can go back to open campuses like we had previously where students can leave during the lunch period and then come back. And then we could go back to our normal 7-day schedule or 7-period schedule that we were using under the original CBA with BEA. So those are our 2 options.
In which, I guess, is there a recommendation from,
we would, well,
from my standpoint, one board member, sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to optimize what gets us back fastest, and
either one will get kids back at the same rate. I I really think going back to something that kids are familiar with, which is the two lunch periods, but we need to work with Carrie Lang on that.
Okay.
Because kids leaving in cars without masks would be definitely a spread opportunity. And so we just need to have those conversations. So
But when you speak to that, you're not talking about K through 5, right? Like K through
I'm
5.
talking secondary, 6
Okay.
through 12.
So we would be able to do K through 5 full day. And
We do not have the quantity of food on hand that we need to feed all these kids. Like if we pre-ordered that because it's perishable, it goes bad, right? So we basically need 2 weeks. If you told me that we were starting May 10th, then we would order all the food for it. You know, but I need 2 weeks to get food and get employees.
So to add on to that question, if I may, I didn't hear anything from Dr. Duran that actually indicated that we're pursuing those options. So I'd like some clarification. I heard that there was an attention being paid to those who were failing classes. But as I've mentioned to you, the governor's proclamation is about a health crisis, a mental and a social emotional health crisis. And it's not about a crisis that is at intervention level for all kids. It's a pervasive thing that's affecting all kids, not at the same level, but that all kids are having that. And when I heard you talk about the options you're pursuing, it didn't sound like they were addressing the large group of kids.
Christine, we need to discuss this in closed session, to be honest with you.
Well, so we had a meeting last week on Wednesday, a special meeting of the board, and we discussed these items in public. And so I believe that Dr. Chu is just reiterating some of those same issues that have already been brought up.
What I can reiterate at this point is that for us to consider changing the schedule, we would need to go back to the bargaining table and request BEA to join us there.
So do you need further clarification from the board again? Because we did have the resolution, and then we did have the special meeting last week to clarify, and it was very clear, it came from the entire board.
So yes, I think it would be great because it's one of the options that's there, but we haven't pursued that yet. As mentioned in the resolution, one of the first things was to continue to build our partnership with BEA and to think about how we're going to maximize this current MOU. So we are doing that. That's one of the first things that we've talked about.
So go ahead, yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this mic on. Logistical question. Why do the tents, if there were tents, have to be set up on the sports field and for sports to be canceled? Couldn't they be like in the front circles and other grassy areas?
So parking lots, not every school has front area grassing. So like for high schools, if you put them in the parking lots, then you've got all these kids driving to school, right? So, I mean, so basically wherever we put them on campus is an area that is generally used when you have people and kids in school. So there are some outdoor eating opportunities and things. So again, we have a schedule that will work with a 3-period day or 3 periods of lunch. We have that schedule. We also have a schedule that works with 2. It just depends on what direction we want to go in. With respect to moving forward with 2 full days a week and then alternating Wednesdays, there was a meeting today about meet and confer with BEA discussing that, and I think we need to talk about implications of that in a closed session before we move forward with posting anything about what the schedule will be when.
I just want to say, Dr. Duran, you made reference to the resolution, and it does say, you know, first implement the MOU, work to see what can be done for the week of the 19th. But as of the 26th, it says maximize the hours, and it's referring to the proclamation. So my understanding is that the MOU would allow you, except for working out the lunch challenge, to get to 2.5 days of hybrid within the current MOU. And the challenge, as I had understood it, was food. And that seemed to me to be something that was something that could have been anticipated. That's not news that we would be hoping to go back to school. And food would not be something we'd be thinking about today. We would have been thinking about it in mid-March to plan for it. And so that's, I think, the question. Is that in fact the blocker, and can we unblock it?
No, as we mentioned in previous sessions, that I think one of the blockers is that our current MOU it has the ability for us to be able to go to more time, but we would have to approach BEA with bargaining a new schedule. So unless I'm misinterpreting some part of the MOU, I could use some clarification there, but we would have to approach BEA on bargaining if we're going to change the schedule based on our current MOU. And then I think again to Deputy DeVita's point is the fact that as we are thinking about food, once we have a date, it's then 2 weeks for them to be able to get the food in. And so once we have a date locked in, that we're able to do it. So we can anticipate it, but until that date is locked in, it's very difficult for us to order, what we need.
So we'll continue with questions, but to be clear, the resolution was passed 2 weeks ago. So it has been 2 weeks, and it has set dates in it as well, which are the dates that are required by law. That law supersedes anything else, and that law was in place while negotiations were happening.
While negotiations were wrapping up is when it came out. And I do believe, as we've mentioned previously, that we are in compliance with the governor's proclamation. We are going to be providing our students 30% of in-person instructional time, and we will be working to maximize, the time that we have with our students. But again, if we want to change the schedule for both elementary and secondary students, we would need to go back to the bargaining table and request BEA to join us there.
We'll continue to ask questions. This is, there seem to be some discrepancies in what is being said now than what was being said previously, but we'll continue with questions. Is there anything else?
I do have one question about what we raised on our April 6th meeting. You did articulate in the meeting that you were making I think a commitment to full day as of September, that we would return to in-person full day. At that time, we'd mentioned that it was important that the community know that and hear it, and that it be socialized. I've been checking the website every day, and I don't see it. I don't see that clarity. It's possible that it's sort of buried within a link, but that too would be a problem. So I just would like to know two things. One, can you re-articulate it for those who are listening and watching? And then two, when and how will this be shared? Because I think I've heard from too many parents who've left the district or living in Florida and have just, I think some of the parents' experiences said, my kid was suffering deeply and is now fine. We want to come back, but we see no indication that the school district is committed to coming back full time. So I've given a verbal recitation, but I think it's important for them to see it and hear it from the superintendent.
Yeah, so yes, mentioned it previously in board meeting, and we have communicated this to our community. So we did message this out prior to spring break, so it was in our back to buildings return. So we have made a statement. Matters of fact, between the time that we made that statement and today, Deputy DeVita and I had a meeting with some of our community members that have been, really asking us a lot about what is fall going to look like, and they acknowledged receipt of that. And what they asked us to do be more clear around what does it mean by the health and safety guidelines, because to them it felt a little loose still. So we are planning to have a full return in the fall. We will be following the health and safety guidelines at that time, but we will be messaging that out to our families this week. It'll be in the message on the 22nd, which is Thursday.
Okay, well, I will ask and I can make a motion. I would like that to be on our website as well, because I
course.
think that is very important. I mean, often families don't see emails or they get lost, but they will see what is posted and they consider that news or what is most current.
Yeah,
So
and
if you.
I can share the communication strategy for that if that'll be helpful. But I also just want to go back to, yes, it's important for us to get it on our website, but we also need to spend time communicating this to our families in other ways also. You know, as I've met with some of our communities, especially some of our BIPOC communities, they do not use our website in the ways that we think they do. We've been having conversations with them on other ideas and suggestions, so we will have to do even additional engagement to make sure that our families understand that. But I'm happy to share the communication role of that and all the different mediums that we will use to share that information. And it'll be something that will be ongoing throughout this time.
Sure. I mean, I'm not suggesting the website is right for everyone. I'm saying it's kind of a minimum standard. And then, of course, additionally share, of course, additionally have small groups or one-to-one conversations. But I think if it's not on the general means that many people rely upon, then it's a missed opportunity.
Agree.
Clarify, you say you want to share a plan. Are you sharing that plan with us now? When is that plan being shared?
I will share it with you tomorrow, Dr. Wiest.
Okay. And then Dr. Serafin, I heard you make a motion. Would you like to make that motion in full?
I can't. I mean, I know that the superintendent has sometimes wondered, like, if one board member's request is sufficient. So if you would like that, I can make it. I just know that I expected after the last board meeting that I would see something. And so I appreciate the resolution's been on there, but that is probably the thing that I get asked most frequently. And it's me citing the board meeting is just not adequate. So I'm just sharing that. If it's important to you to have all of us make a motion, we can do that, but that's all I'm
Dr. Serafin, why
It's
don't
not
you go
important
ahead and make the motion?
to me. I
Because
feel
this
like
was announced at a board meeting on March 16th. On our March 16th board meeting, this is when the information was announced, and it's still not widely known by our community.
Do we know which email from the district that was in the back to buildings update? Do we know the date that was in?
I will get those
The last
specific dates
two.
for you.
It was in the
so.
last
I
two.
think,
I'm skimming them.
We've
I'm
sent
not
it
seeing
out twice, so we're happy to put together a timeline when we've done this. You know, we've messaged this out. It is on our site. We've managed in social media, and I'm happy to put together the timeline around when we messaged this, when it went out, who received it, and then also talk about what the communication strategy is this week and to get more information out.
I think the point that's being made, we need to be able to have open discussions and not feel backed into corners and no secret conversations between this group and that group or whatever. We need to be able to be open. And the thing that's being raised right now is that information that's pertinent to our community needs a persistent, reliable location to reside so it can be referenced or found when looked for, in addition to all of the powerful things that you are doing and that we are talking about. I know that we have a project reaching out to do Spanish language videos to help people access information. That's critical, you are right. And so too are the communications going out about back to school to families. Those are important, you are right. And we want to make sure that the most up-to-date information has a persistent home and a reliable location that can be referenced. That's part of what it means to provide great communication to our community. And if the website is not the only good location, if we also need it to have some other permanent locations that are accessible to different groups of people, we should identify what those are and put them there. But we shouldn't be delaying putting the information in the persistent spot until after other things are done. That's a spot, like I think what is being asked for here, certainly I expect to be able to find and point to these things when they happen. And it seems silly that the board would be making motions to do that, but if we need to do that, we can do that. But I don't understand why we can't just have an honest conversation and say, hey, these are great strategies, and please put this on the website. So are we like, can that go up right away? Is there a problem in the communication strategy that is identified in the communications plan that says it's bad to put it up first? Like, is there a problem with just doing that?
No, there's not a problem. We will get it, post it as soon as possible. We can communicate this information out, and we'll have it on.
All right, if that's acceptable with board members, we will move on from there, but we will be looking for it tomorrow.
I have another question.
Yes.
It's not a focused question about the exactitude of operations. It's more of a, we have observed rifts in our community over the last year of this time. It has been a challenging and difficult time for everyone. Everyone has made special efforts to make things work. Our teachers, our district staff, our building leaders, our families, our parents, our students, everyone. And when we leave different parts of those out of a conversation, people feel disempowered, they feel powerless to act, they don't feel like they have any control or any say. And one of the things that is at the heart of our work on equity is ensuring that we are bringing voices to the forefront from all, especially those who are marginalized by our systems. So I don't know where in all the work that's being done right now, we're bringing the voices of our students and our families and our teachers into the same sphere. But I'm wondering what the options are to bring those voices together as you figure out how to operationalize the plan to get the kids back into classrooms for the end of the year and to maximize their opportunities to respond to that. Is there anything being done that's bringing those voices together?
So first I want to say that the information around the return for fall is on our website, and to get a message from Janine Thorne, our interim director of communication. It's been messaged out various in our back to building messages, but we will make sure that it's more prominent. So it is on our website, and if you look in the back to buildings update. So as far as gaining diverse perspectives, yeah, absolutely. It's something that we do on a regular basis. I think, we've been doing a lot of work with our students to have some of those conversations. Our students have been giving us feedback through lots of different ways. As I said, I've been working with a group of students who have been working to plan a student town hall that's all centered around belonging and dignity. And one of the things we were going to share is that one of the things we did talk about was figuring out a way to survey students around what are some of the needs that they're going to have over the next couple months, and then what are some of the needs that they're anticipating even for the fall. I think it's important to gather that feedback and perspective. So we do have a plan in place to utilize a thought exchange for our students at the secondary level, and then do a follow-up with many of those students so we can dig deeper. So it's going to be a very, almost like a hyper-focus focus group that we're going to be doing with a group of students. So yeah, we have definitely been gathering student perspective and voice. I would say that with our educators, we have just started having some of our conversations with our BEA leadership, and I think that's an important place for us to start having these conversations as we've gone out and visited schools, talking with educators and talking with our school leaders. We definitely gain different perspectives, and we learn about what's happening. We learn about some feedback. And then of course, we get numerous emails that come directly to me or to my staff for issues that we need to address and deal with. We meet with our school leaders on a regular basis, and so we have a lot of feedback that we gather from them, talk about some of the successes and challenges that they're facing. And so that's a really key thing. And then we have been having multiple conversations with our family members. I know Director Jones is on, and so he can talk more around some of the family engagement. I think we still have a lot of work to do in that area. I've had numerous meetings with some of our community groups to talk about some of the issues and challenges that they have. And the one thing I will say about our families that I've said before, but I will continue to emphasize, is that none of our families and any of our groups, if we talk about the Latino group, is not a monolithic group. They have multiple perspectives, multiple ideas, multiple ways of thinking, seeing things. And so even though we may have one group come together, it still requires us to continue to have deeper conversations because there's different representative views. So yes, we've been doing a lot of feedback and efforts. I think we still have a lot more to do. And as we have more in-person services, I think that's going to afford us the opportunity to sit down and talk with more of our school staff to hear about what's been working and what's not working, and then talk about some of the things that we need to do.
Thank you for reviewing that set of work that's being done. The question that I asked was, what are we doing right now to bring those voices together in the same place to have conversations and to start bringing us back together as a community as we try to meet kids' needs and do so within the realm of what others can handle and do and stay safe within?
I would say one example was the Superintendent Community Advisory Group. That's a perfect example of a community group that we brought together that had multiple perspectives ranging from our students to business leaders in our community. And it's a good example around how they represented different groups and brought different ideas in. So we definitely have done it when we have specific tasks and reasons that we're trying to accomplish and we really need specific feedback. But other than that, I think it always falls within our advisory groups. So we're thinking about bringing different groups in, but we haven't formed anything specifically right now around just where we are and what we need to do. I mean, it's something that we can consider, but quite honestly, we have a lot of other things that we're working on right now. It's an important part, and so we'll continue to use some of the pieces that we have in place right now for gathering some of that feedback.
Well, the reason that I ask is it seems that there are differing interpretations of what it means to maximize learning time for students. And I think talking to one group and then another and going back and forth is just pitting us all to be positioned as battling one another instead of trying to come to some common understandings of what is meant and what the best thing to do is to go forward. So I'm going to end my line of inquiry here, but I want to be clear that our community, in addition to our students being in pain, our educators being brought to the edge, and our families being, just exhausted from the whole thing and not sure what to do about many of the problems their kids are facing, we are fracturing as a community. And that is going to cause more long-term harm and prevent us from taking care of our kids and taking care of each other as we move forward. So in my view, one of the most important opportunities we have in front of us right now is, as we reconcile this difference of understanding, is that we do so in a way that is different than we have done all year long, because the way we have done things all year long is not working all that effectively and is continuing to contribute to fracturing our community. So whatever creativity that you can bring to bear in that space would be very appreciated, because we need to come back together to support our kids and each other.
Directors, are there other comments? Otherwise, we can continue with the overall report. So there are some other issues that are there.
Clarify, we will send something to the board tomorrow that has an outline of when we sent information out around our fall plans. And we will share with you our communication strategy this week and all the different places that we'll be posting. And we will make sure that it is more prominent on our website so that there is no question around what we have put out as our intentions for the fall.
Would it be possible to have a short executive session? I know, now.
You can motion.
Yeah, I would move that we have an executive session on the topic that was raised by Deputy DeVita.
So you want a closed session?
A closed session.
There's a
Just a
motion to
15
have an
minutes.
exempt session.
Wait, let's be clear. Is this a motion for a closed session or an executive session? If
Sorry,
it's an
I should have said
executive session,
closed
what is the
session. What's
topic?
a closed
A closed
exempt
session?
session on the
Correct.
topic of bargaining.
Okay, thank you.
Because otherwise, I think some of the questions I would have, I want to ensure that if I'm going to ask additional questions, that they're not ones that might be better asked in that context.
So we just do that now and then move the rest of the agenda down? I see. Thank you.
So there's a motion, you'd like to take that immediately, and for what length of time? Or would you like to finish the rest of the updates? We could do a closed session and move our break up as well, and then resume for.
I would propose 15 or 20 minutes. I don't know if others.
So I think technically the motion is that you would like to recess this meeting.
Yeah, I think.
For a certain amount of time.
Right.
And then we can use it at our discretion, whatever we would like on the recess portion, because it's different.
I'll take that modification.
Okay, so I have a motion to recess for 25 minutes. Is there a second?
Sure.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we have a majority, the motion passes. We are in recess until 5:45. Okay, we're back. That's okay. So just turn it back on.
Turn it back on.
Are we back on? Okay. So we are resuming. There's a little bit of transit time. The room that's large enough to move to is across campus. So as we come back, we're going to continue an abbreviated return to buildings update. So Dr. Duran, if you could just give us the one-liner. There were a number of issues that had come up on transportation, in-person assessments, summer school, things of that nature. If you could just give us a one-liner on each of those.
Give you a quick one-liner, and the document that we did post on board docs has information in each of these areas with the exception of measuring success on SCAC and transportation. So we will update that document and include that, give you a new version of it. But the document that is in board docs has a lot of this information inside of it. Our team had worked to prepare some of this, but basically summer school, we will have an update for you this Friday. We're still working through a couple of details on that. It'll be in the board update. I already mentioned the one part is we will be measuring. One of the questions that came at the board meeting is around how are we going to be measuring success on the SCAC report. So one of the things we have already started putting together is like, what is our current baseline data in those areas? What data do we have? But I just want to clarify, we have not made any decisions around what we will be investing in. That's still a conversation that we have to have, and we need to have some more conversation. Transportation, John, can you do your quick one-liner on transportation, or Melissa, which of you is?
Everything is about the 200 routes and 800 routes are all up on the website.
You're muted.
The 200 routes and the 800 routes are both up on the website, and all the new bus routes are up there, and everything should be good to go.
So we are covering the spots where the Metro is not covering. In-person assessments, John?
Yeah, just really quickly, you recall last week that a student came and made a passionate, articulate statement about the use of instructional time and suggesting that using it for assessments that take up significant instructional time with limited in-person time was a bad idea. You all agreed, and many of us, if not all of us, also agreed. So we've drafted a communication that basically lets teachers know that using instructional time for the purposes of assessments with such limited time is not a good idea. And to the degree possible, having all assessments that take up significant time happen virtually. And so that language was shared with principals today, and they'll be sharing it with their staffs before students return on Monday.
Data on how many students requested switch learning models, that is included in the information we gave to the board. It has a lot of detailed information broken down by demographics, so you can see that. So how are cameras working with concurrent instruction? Again, that is included in that document. I think the one thing that I think is really critical on that is that we have deployed about 600 of the cameras in the classrooms. You know, they've done some PD. There's going to be a lot of follow-up PD. Many of our staff are just out supporting, helping out. But I think the one thing that is a bright spot is that this is definitely a technology that will not only be used this year, but I think well into the future, because it provides a lot of opportunities for students who may not be able to be in person, whether they're sick or not. So there's a lot of promise with that. And then there in the packet, there is the differences between the courses offered in the virtual program and the hybrid model. We talked about that at the very beginning of the year. So we included that information as well as a little bit more content around which of those courses and what is difference in the curriculum. We had more about the virtual experiences, and that's in the document that we shared there. We have some specific examples of what some schools are doing to be creative, innovative in terms of supporting students and providing more in-person services. And to what extent are students feeling connected? Eva, do you want to hit on that part? We already have some of our panorama data that we're in process of collecting. What else is just a real quick one-liner on that?
This is Director of Research Evaluation and Assessment. The one-liner on Panorama is we have about 30% of the data in so far. The window closes on the May 28th, so we'll have more complete data after that. And what we're seeing from the preliminary results is that student sense of connectedness to peers has stayed relatively stable from fall to spring.
Thank you. And the last thing that was in the last board conversation, which is something I think we need to bookmark and have a deeper conversation about at a board meeting, is around, there was a request for a systemic summary on equity. And I'm not clear exactly what that means, because we went back immediately to our equity and accountability policy, knowing that we will be doing that on an annual basis, and we're starting compiling data and information there. So if there's something more that the board is looking for, I'd like to have that conversation at a future meeting.
I think I might have been
you.
the person who asked for that. So this is Christine.
Would you like to have a follow-up conversation?
We can do that, but I can also just state in a very tiny space that I think that what I'm looking for is that we have said that every program, everything that we do will run through the equity. And we've made sure that the critical criteria not only ask us to think deeply about the impacts to all students in the community, but all stakeholders really, but it also includes how we will know if we have encountered any of the problems we've identified. So tracking it and adjusting, and then also what stakeholder groups will identify. So in this back to school plan that we have put together, that we're enacting right now, that we're rolling out, that we're about to really do a big push on next Monday, right? With our secondary students. What does it look like to have done the equity analysis for that? And where's the critical criteria review for that? And what does it look like? Because that's a new instantiation of programming that we're rolling out. So just want to see what's going on with that. That was kind of the request in a nutshell. Happy to talk about it in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there anything else?
Yeah, we will need to update the document that we posted earlier with some additional information, so we'll take care of that.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
Director Weiss, just to clarify, it's not the analysis I'm looking for, it's the documentation so that it brings all of us into deep understanding about where the barriers and inequities are that we are tracking and dealing with and addressing, because we know no plan is perfect, and we just want to understand as deeply as the staff might what the issues of equity are, what the issues of access and the barriers that different groups of our students are facing, and how we're addressing them, so we can understand and also guide our oversight and our policy work accordingly.
Okay, so as we wrap up that section, Dr. Drake, if you want to just give a few closing comments. So again, with regards to the board resolution, there were several items in there. One was to continue to maximize within the existing MOU. One was to provide 4 instructional opportunities in this week of April 19th as per the proclamation. And then again, with a more full update towards maximizing that time on April 26th. So we still have a few days until that April 26th. But if you can clarify how we've are in compliance to date as it is after April 19th, and then what the plan is between now and April 26th and what we can expect, that will close out this section.
So again, we submitted all of our information into OSPI, and so OSPI is the educational arm of our state, and they have approved our plan, and we can start spending down our ESSR funds on April 26th. And so we are showing that we are compliant in that area. We will have more students come obviously on the 26th. We're looking for that, and I think that it's an important point for us that this marks a really significant time. I think even previously to spring break, that was a moment for us to celebrate, to have some of our secondary students in. We know it's not enough. We know we want more. We'll continue to work on that. We do have more students who will be receiving, up to 400 students will receive additional services beginning on the 26th. As I mentioned earlier, we met with our both elementary and secondary leaders today. Our secondary leaders are really having to do some work with their counselors to reach out to students and offer these opportunities for the students to be able to receive additional information, be able to receive additional support and additional guidance. And as I think about it from a lens of equity, equity is about ensuring that those who need the most support receive it. And I really do believe that what we are working on is really driving some of that. We have some work to do in the area of mental health and emotional support. I know our counselors have been doing some work on there, but I know that there's greater needs out there. So we will follow up with our teams to ensure that we are also reaching out to students and figuring out ways to provide additional supports for them.
Okay, I would iterate that there is a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done with regards to mental health. That would be across the board, opportunities for all students, not just ones that may have been previously identified. And then with that, additionally, as those are goal 1 and goal 2 is around academic supports, we were slated to have a discussion on the goal 2 report. In the interest of time, directors, I would move that we move the majority of that discussion to the next meeting. However, after, if each of you wants to make a small statement regarding goal 2 and anything that you would like to see if we move it to the next meeting, and then we could close out that section and then allow time for other discussion. So that would be my motion.
Do you need a second?
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so that passes. So directors, go ahead if you want to make one statement on goal 2, and that would close out that section.
I'll go.
Okay.
So in looking through the academic success report that was in board docs, there was a lot of things that kind of came up, but I'll say the one thing that sort of really did, there were 2 things that came up for me. One, so a lot of the discussion on supports for kids that need more academic support, kids that are failing or whatever, reference the asynchronous time and small groups in person. So I have 2 questions on that. One is, what about the virtual kids who are not in person? Because there's a lot of reference about how being in person is going to make this better, but there are some kids that are not in person. The other question is, especially for elementary, they're in an A-B hybrid formation, A in the morning, B in the afternoon. There are no small groups except maybe on Wednesdays. So there's no, might be some in-person small groups, but there's no like within the classroom, but it's not small group the way you described it in the report. And so for the elementary kids that are not having the afternoon, small group, whatever, how are those kids going to get caught up on math or whatever it is? So those are the sort of things I'd like to see some discussion on that if we move this to next time.
All right, thank you. And Director Serafin. Director Watson.
So in reviewing this, the progress report, I had a couple of reactions, and one was that I couldn't really tell much in the sense that with the testing, it seemed like I needed to know, like I'm looking at the 3.5 by subgroup 2019 to 2020. It seemed like there were different numbers of kids tested and from one year to the next, and I wasn't given the numbers for how many had been tested in 2019. So it was kind of hard to tell, whether there were some of the kids who weren't doing as well, maybe were some of the ones that somehow weren't tested, not that testing is the be all and end all. And then we saw that we seemed on track because some of the grades, we couldn't do the standardized testing. So we said, if you got an A or a B, you're probably okay. And I was just reflecting on that and thinking, I do believe that if a teacher is getting to know a kid and looking at a kid and says, this kid is really getting it, and they get an A or B, that means a lot to me. But it's hard to, it's just hard to know whether one teacher to the next and how that holds up. So I guess one of my reactions to this report is that I just can't tell how our kids are doing academically. And then the other one, I was just having some, trying to do comparing the statistics and not knowing how many, whether we were missing a big chunk of kids that weren't performing as well, who also weren't testing this year. So that's it. I just
All right.
can't tell.
Director Chu?
Yeah, she called on you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were,
Okay.
she was done.
Yeah, I think I echo a little bit of what Carolyn says, but really my question is for you guys. There's a lot of data in this report, and what I really want to understand from the folks who are closer to the ground in understanding where the kids are at is, where are the kids at? What's the bottom line for you? What is this data telling you? Where are we good with our kids? Like, where are our kids learning and studying good? Where are they struggling, and where are we actually worried? Where are we losing sleep? And the other question to go with it is really, what is driving the decision-making in the classrooms and at the school building levels to help us determine where our kids are at? You know, in this, with regards to this report academically, but eventually we want to also talk about what's driving our understanding of where they're all at with their social emotional needs. And it's a very different time. As I said, I'll say again and again, it's a time of crisis where the impacts are more pervasive, and we need to continue to look out for those who need significant intervention. But we also need to recognize that the impact is on everybody. So I really want to understand deeply how you guys know and what you're worried about, like where kids are at and how we're going to do it. And then my final thought from this report that I'd love to learn more about is what the plan is for professional development for teachers, because we cannot take on the old strategy of assess and remediate. We really are going to have to teach differently next year in a way that makes sure that we're not exacerbating any gaps that have been caused by the learning, both systemically, because there are different populations who have not accessed at the same rate, but also at random, because kids have tuned out at different points based on where they're socio-emotionally at. And so how are we supporting our educators to think differently about how to make the education at the next level still accessible? And what's the way that we're doing work now and that we plan to keep doing? Because I think that is going to be one of the biggest themes, and I want to understand how we support one another in that space. So those are the things that stood out for me, and I'm hoping we get to hear more about at the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Director. So just to summarize some of the things that I heard, so that we'd like to see in the, so perhaps it would be an updated report, and anything that stands out as needing to be addressed sooner could be provided in an update prior to the May 4th meeting. So some of the things I heard and I agree with are there was, so let me just take a step back and say the status of students as indicated in this report is extremely concerning. Most of them are not on track. The few that were on track, interestingly, in the previous report we had said that they were not on track and there was no way of getting them potentially back on track. And now they are potentially on track by using different measures, grades, that were provided with a different standard level than previously. So there are some significant concerns with how our students are doing, and it's something that we've been asking for a while, because we do hear reports of some students who are doing well, who are thriving in virtual environment with access to different types of resources and supports than previously. But we also hear reports of students who are not doing well, who are suffering, who are disengaging, and perhaps permanently altered and affected by the system and the situation they find themselves in. And this report indicates that on balance, we appear to have more students who are struggling. So with that, there were some indications of path forwards that referenced a lot about in-person. So again, as Director Malief said, what about the students who've remained in virtual, the supports for them. I heard her also talk about how small groups will be conducted in elementary under the current schedule. We hear about some of the data is not fully presented in terms of the numbers tested, so it makes it difficult for comparison. There was the question about grades. And then overall, it is difficult to tell how students are doing and their path forward from where we are and the supports that they're going. Director Chu enumerated several of the questions. They're similar to the questions that I continue to ask, which is always, what do we want kids to know? How are we going to ensure that they know it? And how do we know that that has actually happened? And so if we could have a little bit more clarity on that, and perhaps that will come in terms of the presentation, but with the report itself. And I can send additional information. And Dr. Duran, as you know, I've pulled the last couple of reports, which indicated certain things were going to happen, such as embedded professional development, more work on Lexia and Freckle. And then in this report, none of those things are mentioned and followed up. So it'd be nice to see some of that through line across reports.
I do have one thing that
Yes.
did not fit
Yeah,
under
go ahead.
Tier 2 goal, but I did want to just ask about, which is, I'd like to just renew my request before, and I don't know if other board members support this as well, but what we can do for the summer. So it may not be an academic necessarily focus, but it could be 4 weeks of social emotional connection. So if we think about what was lost, but we have maybe 4 weeks over the summer that students could, it would be COVID positive in the sense that students getting together, seeing each other, addressing maybe unmet needs, but not doing it on their own in a way that might actually harm the community without masks before vaccination. So it could be academic, it could be social, its goal could be a mix of things, but I think there's a lot of certainly asks, and anytime discussion about particularly families whose kids are struggling, that's one of the first things they ask. So I would ask for, you know, what are the options? What are the plans? And if other board members are in support of that, I would, you know, maybe consider like sharing.
I believe
now.
that. Yeah, I think that's just a, it's a build on the, we're off track. How are we getting kids who are off track back on track? It's just another one of the strategies. So if we could understand and have more insight into that, that makes tons of sense to me
Yeah,
too.
and for that, I would just say, I think the challenge is any teacher may think the kid is doing fine. But what I don't know is you might hear from a parent, my kid's not doing fine, and they may show up perhaps academically fine. And so that's where I would not want the metric for who's in or out of consideration to be, you know, have they sustained, you know, they used to have a B+ average, they still do. That may not be the right assessment of who's in need.
All right, so we were going to get a report, an update on summer school, so it sounds like that should be broadly considered. It's not only academic. So the closing part I was going to say on the goal 2 is that we know that well-being and academics in education are often highly intertwined and interdependent. And so as we support students, really both, and one is not at the expense of the other, and in fact, can aid one another. So continuing to have high expectations from students can allow them a way then to express themselves and feel complete. And so it's not that we do not continue to provide education as an educational system, as we recognize that people come to our system with a different set of experiences, lived experiences, and they need their supports. And we don't always know what those are. That trauma or experience or what they're going through is not necessarily visible, and we need to support each and every student regardless. So with that, that brings us to item 7 on our agenda. We were going to get an update from SIFE. Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
maybe that's the problem, microphone on, microphone off. But, so we were having this discussion of academic success and so forth, and we have this report, and we talked about some of the interventions and strategies of summer school and so forth. And I just wanted to ask if going forward, we could have a little clarity on the paragraph at the top of the page on page 5 of the report about math, because here it says they're talking about some of the strategies, possibly summer school and into next year. We're going to implement equity focused strategies, math acceleration, and improved math curriculum materials, teacher professional learning with those, increasing math instructional expertise in our elementary and middle school title schools, and personal supports and pre-teaching during the summer. That's a lot. That's a lot. And so I was wondering if at some point people could elaborate on that. You know, it seems like those phrases have an awful lot of meaning. We're going to be changing our math curriculum. We're going to be doing more and different PD. We're going to have experts coming in. I'd like to know more about that.
So Director Watson and all directors, we may frame this when we get to our agenda setting meeting, Dr. Duran, in terms of perhaps having a workshop, because there were certainly a lot of clarifying questions that I had even regarding the use of STAR testing, the correlation with SBA, which is not being offered. Additionally, that does bring up that since SBA testing is not happening this spring and it is happening in the fall, what other measures are going to be used? In the OSPI guidance, there were a number of recommendations, and those are not reflected in the report. However, I understand the report may have been near completion when that came out. So this will provide an opportunity to update that. So we'll look at the calendar and determine whether there's time to have this in part as a workshop session so that those clarifying questions can be answered as well. And then the board could be more informed in providing oversight and direction as to the next steps. Does that sound reasonable? Directors? Yes? Yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item 7. We'll get an update from SIFE.
All right, Director Malief, you want me to? All right, so Director Malief and I are working with our board coordinator, Tish, and with John Harrison and with Shamari Jones and with Shamari's staff on trying to set up those meetings that we all said with our community groups. And there are 2 things I want to bring to your attention tonight. One, due to our families and our resources all being very stretched thin, we're not going to pull this off in the grand design that we had. It won't be like, here are all the dates, sign up now. We're going to be able to provide the dates as they roll out and ask who's available to attend. So Director Malief and I are going to attend the first 2 listening sessions with our Latinx family group and with our Asian family group representatives next Wednesday. And then after that, we'll have a schedule and or as much of a schedule as we can. As soon as we have notice, you'll receive notice, and we'll try to make sure that every board member gets to attend at least one of these sessions. So the same sessions that we planned, everything that we talked about, we've added the Asian group in per the request that was made earlier. And so that will happen. So I'm going to pause there and take any questions on that, and then I'm going to roll up the second part.
Yeah, Director Chu, can you just maybe give highlights of the groups that you're planning to have? I do want to make sure that as we reach out to our community that we're thinking of that broadly. So we've got our students, we've got our families, we have our educators, we have our other support staff.
You're getting ahead of us. So
okay,
yeah. So the groups that we're starting with are those groups that are the smaller, more focused groups, often groups that our system marginalizes, so that we want to make sure that we give full access and conversation to them. We're trying to make sure that we talk to family members, educators, and students, but based on the way this timeline is rolling out, it may be that we don't get full sets of that at the beginning. But in addition to that, we were talking, Director Malief and I were discussing, and I've run this by Mr. Harrison as well, And I think that with the way that things are going in the community right now, we really need to make sure that the whole community has greater access to the board and that the board has greater access and connection to the community so that as we're making decisions moving forward, that we can finish strong in this year and start strong next year together, and that the board is fully connected to that work. So we're going to propose and we're going to work on this, but we just want to get your initial take tonight. But we'd like to propose that in the middle of May, we'd be adding some additional forums. And those forums would be a larger style forum than some of these small focus group discussions. But we'd like to do several different staff groups, like, you know, certificated educators and certificated leaders and just a different groups. So probably like 3 to 4 staff groups, and then also some larger community groups. Already included in our focus set of groups is our educators of color. But in addition to that, we'd like to broaden out our touch with staff and with our community as a whole so that we can make sure that the decisions we make in direction setting, budget approval, and policy planning for next year are actually going to meet the needs of the community members and the educators, and that we're all on the same page. So we'd like the board's blessing to add those. They wouldn't be necessarily 5 board directors and a huge in-person thing, but it'd probably be something more like what Director Wiest coordinated for the community about a month or so ago, where it was a Q&A, it was a live session, and there were 2 of us board directors who attended, and people were able to ask questions and interact and give feedback. And we would have some questions that would guide those sessions that would be about what do you need to move forward? What are the biggest challenges you're facing right now? What stuff. So that's kind of the thing on the horizon. So I just wanted to get some quick feedback from the board on that. Director Malif, is there anything you would add to clarify that? Okay, and when we talked to Mr. Harrison, he was very positive about that concept as something that he thinks would be helpful as well moving us forward.
I think I missed when you were thinking of doing this.
I think we would do them in the middle of May is probably the time that we could actually use the information that we got and apply it to decision making for next year. So if we waited too long, so yeah.
All right, Director Serafan or Watson, do you have any comments for the SIFE committee? Okay.
I'll be happy to participate if called upon to do so.
I'm supportive of the plans. I don't have, I mean, I think I defer to you guys in terms of the committee and what you're hearing and what you think the needs are. So I would defer to you.
And part 3 in that, before you comment, is also the, we would be happy to work with that student group. That student group is also on our list. So if it would be helpful to you to have that be folded into the work we're doing, that we were already planning to do something there, so we can keep the board appraised of that too.
That would be great. So I'm fully supportive. I think I really enjoy when we have the community forums. It's been more challenging in this past year to reach out to the community. I've been doing what I can, but I think the more that we are able to do that and have everyone visible and participating, whether it is in pairs or if occasionally we have all of us, but certainly we've been receiving the emails from the community and absorbing and integrating that into our work. But I think there's that opportunity for conversation that's really important. And yeah, again, the more that we're able to coordinate, and I think this, in terms of the time and setting up for the coming year, is extremely important. All right, anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So then nobody submitted any written reports. Okay, so if there are, you submit them for the next meeting. I think the only one probably to announce is that April 30th, next Friday, is the Spring for Schools luncheon for Bellevue Schools Foundation. So register and attend. Okay, so then with agenda planning, we have already put a number of things on for the May 4th meeting, but if you find something else, and then just a reminder, although a lot of the statements were made regarding the Goal 2 report, if you have something additional that you want to provide in writing, then send it to Dr. Duran and can certainly CC me as well, so that we make sure that we allocate time accordingly on the agenda. Okay. With that,
Don't adjourn us, right?
no.
Okay.
With that, I motion to recess us to a time certain, which would be Wednesday at 11 a.m. for our executive session. That needs a second. And it would be virtual only.
I'll second.
We'll provide a link for that. All right, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, with that, we are in recess.